You're listening to Living Off Grit. I am your host, Lucia, and I am posting this a little bit later than usual because I've been busy just living life. And like I told you guys, I was really trying to record here and there, but it's really difficult because I'm in the moment. Sometimes I'm not even taking photos, or, I'm not really paying attention to the fact that I have to upload because that's not really what's happening in my head at the moment, or when I get, to my Airbnb at night. But you may hear that my voice is a little raspy. I don't know if it's because I've stayed up pretty late and I've been out and it's been cold, but maybe it's catching up to me. I don't know. So I wanted to touch on something that I have been asked for a very long time. And it is, but don't you ever get lonely? And the reason why I want to talk about this is because yesterday I went to the Edinburgh Castle, and there are families, there are groups, and there are people that are just by themselves, but for the most part, if you look around, they're families or couples or, groups of people that are together. And in the afternoon, I started getting hungry, and I didn't really want to, go all the way down into town again and look for a restaurant. So I noticed that there was a tea room in the castle where they have, a typical afternoon tea of pastries and scones and little sandwiches. And I was like, oh, maybe I should do that. That would be a nice experience. And, there were people waiting for their tables. And I go up to the server or to the host, and he's like, for how many people? And I'm like, oh, a table for one. And when I said table for one, people just looked at me. Now I'm used to it at this point, but you do notice that people kind of look at you either with pity or with confusion. But so anyway, so he's like, oh, it's gonna take about 10 minutes. I'm like, okay. So I'm waiting, and obviously these other groups of people have been waiting before I have. And he goes up to me, and he's like, oh, and this was maybe 5 minutes later. He goes, oh, a table for one. And then everyone looked at me again. But this time it was more like, how dare you? We were here waiting and now she gets a table. But again, it's just one person. So they sat me down at the table. And yes, it took about almost half an hour for them to, take my order because they were really busy and they seemed understaffed. So again, I didn't really care. I was there for the experience. But while I was waiting, there was a table in front of me, a group of three girls, or it was like a little girl and two women. And ever so often, like when I looked that way, just because I was kind of trying to appreciate my surroundings and, the decor, and just being in the moment, once in a while, one of the women would kind of look at me and smile. And it was like a pity smile, like, oh, you're here alone, but we're also, you're not alone because you're in this room and we're here, kind of thing. Like, that's just that's just how I felt at the moment. And I smiled back, like, okay, because it doesn't really affect me, And there was a couple next to me to my left. They also just kept looking at me. And yeah, maybe it seems weird that one person is okay with being at a table, or maybe some people aren't, but they're just alone that day, or they're single. So that couple kept looking at me too, and I looked over because I noticed them from my peripheral vision, and they kind of just smiled, and I smiled back again, but they gave me like that pity smile. And I don't know if any of you know what I'm talking about. The reason why I know is because when I was maybe 18, 19, going to the theater with my friends, I would see like that one person that was alone, in the theater watching the film by themselves. And I remember thinking with my friends, and even like in high school, we'd be like, oh, look at that person. I wonder what happened. I wonder why they're alone. It's just like, whoa, maybe it's just not that deep, you know. I've been doing it for years, going to the theater alone, going to restaurants alone. If I worked a job that I maybe wouldn't take my lunch, then I would go to the restaurant alone. Like that's just, I mean, that's kind of what you have to do if you if you want to eat, if you want to do something. You're not always gonna have somebody there. And so anyway, so the experience having tea was awesome, but what I wanted to talk about, and this is what I realized yesterday, is that people really may have this idea that because you're alone, it means that you're lonely. And those are two completely different things. I have always been okay with being alone, and it's because I enjoy my own company. So even if I haven't been in a relationship or if I'm not with my friends or my family, I don't feel lonely. I don't feel the need to have someone with me at all times. I'm not dependent on someone's presence to feel happy or pleasure in the moment or be in the moment. None of that, you know? So I just, it's just funny because I'm on this trip, you know, by myself, uh, experiencing things by myself, and you can tell, and I've seen it with other people because I see so many other travelers that are alone as well, and people look at them like, oh, you know, like, oh, poor you, you're here alone, and uh, it's a little strange. I think we need to get out of the habit of thinking that you always need somebody. Now, this is going to sound really sad, but even when I was in a relationship, I always did things alone. And maybe it was because they weren't into what I was into or whatever. I never really expected any of my partners to do everything with me because they were, you know, my partner. That has never really made sense to me. Obviously, there are things that you want to do with them and that you hope they do with you, but you know, if it doesn't happen, then you kind of have to just venture out and do it alone. And I talked about this in one of the other episodes that when I first wanted to travel to New York, my boyfriend at the time, he didn't want to do it. He didn't, you know, he didn't want to plan anything or do anything. And I took it upon myself to just go, okay, well, I'm just going to go by myself. I'm not going to wait for somebody to do it. Um, but I've always been that way, whether I've been in a relationship or not. And I think it's so important to distinguish the difference. In my everyday life, I don't feel lonely. In my everyday life, I go about my day, I do the things that I love to do. I watch TV alone, I do all these things by myself, and never at any point in my day do I feel like, wow, like I wish I could be doing this with somebody else. I wish I could be doing this with a person, or I wish I had this person with me right now, or I wish this and all this stuff. Like, I don't really get lonely. And I had a conversation with my mom recently about this. It's going to sound a little strange for you listening, but my mom understood what I meant. And I told her, if I didn't hear from you or my siblings for like a week, right? I wouldn't feel sad. I wouldn't feel like bad or anything like that. I wouldn't really think anything of it. I It wouldn't affect me because I'm not dependent on people to feel fulfilled. And that may sound a little strange for people who are really close to their families. I'm very close to my family, but let's try to separate things for a moment. You know, people want to talk about blood and, well, their family, or your friends, they're important to you. Yes, but at the end of the day, we're all human. It's a even like playing field. Like, you know, we're all on the same playing field, and even though my mom is my mom, she is also just a human. And when it comes to feeling lonely, I don't need another human to feel complete, you know? And are there times where I feel lonely? Sure. I mean, it happens once in a while. I can't recall the last time I felt lonely because I have so much fun by myself. Honestly, I can find things to do, I can think about things. And for some people, this is a bad thing because, and I've heard it in the past from one of my friends who is no longer my friend, but, uh, you know, would say, like, aren't you scared that you're gonna get to the point that you're so used to being alone that you're always gonna be alone? And that wouldn't scare me if I were to always be alone because I'm used to being alone. It doesn't mean that I'm like some really sad person, you know? Only because I'm used to being alone and I like being alone, it doesn't mean that I will push people away. That's not what I'm saying. You know, what I'm saying is that if I'm not around people, it's okay. I'm not freaking out. I'm not feeling desperate to like feel a presence, or I need someone to fill a void. Um, it isn't really about that, and it's not necessary. And I think sometimes we get so caught up on not ending up alone and not feeling lonely that you have people in your life taking up space and taking up your time, and maybe you're not even enjoying it. It's just so you're not lonely, so people don't look at you like, oh, this person's alone and they're probably lonely all the time, and they need love, and they need this, and they need friends, and they need people around them, so let's just invite them everywhere. That used to happen to me all the time. People, because they knew that I was, single or alone, in their minds I was lonely, so they would invite me everywhere. And because I enjoyed my own company, a lot of the times I would say no because I'm like, I'm already having fun. I don't need to go somewhere else or like be around a bunch of people to feel content with my day or my time or anything like that. And if you've ever wanted to do something alone but you're afraid of feeling lonely or afraid of what people might think of you, please just go ahead and do it. I mean, at the end of the day, do people really care this much about what strangers have to say, or even friends or family? I anything that I do, I'm not paying attention to what other people are thinking about me or doing. Yesterday when I was at the castle, the reason why it stood out so much, it was because we were in a small room waiting for our tables. And also because I am so aware now of my surroundings and I really get people's energy a lot more, it was easy to know what they were thinking or how they meant their smiles or the way that they looked at me. Like, I just found it extremely funny because I'm having my tea and I'm having my scone and I'm putting butter and like everyone's just staring at me. Uh, and towards the end of me finishing, my tea, a family came in. There were like a group of 7, and they kept staring at me like, pobrecita, And I heard one of the ladies across the way saying, oh, um, mira, ella vino sola, and they kind of just talk. I didn't want to hear too much because again, I was just kind of in my own moment, but I do recall that the lady kind of mentioned that, and I assume she was talking about me because I was across the way, but she was more like celebrating it, and even that's kind of weird that you have to celebrate someone being alone or or doing things by themselves, because there's nothing wrong with that. I think if you've gotten used to always doing something with somebody, try doing it alone. See how you feel. Because I don't know, I have so much fun. Even when I'm on the bus alone, I don't know, I'm like in my own world. I'm listening to music, I'm thinking about things, and I don't really pay so much attention to the outside world very much. And not even because I'm on holiday right now, but also when I'm back home, I'm just at the grocery store doing my thing. People are looking at me, and I don't know. I hope we get that out of our minds, that being alone means that you're lonely. I think that even if you are lonely, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, look, I've been through so much in my life, and being independent at some point was a fault, because I felt, oh, I don't need anybody, so let me go through things alone. And sometimes you do need somebody. And when things are tough, or even when you have amazing things happening in your life, sometimes you want to tell somebody that that's fine. What I'm talking about is, don't be dependent on other people for your happiness. And I think that's where loneliness comes in. I think if you're constantly looking for somebody on the outside to bring you that happiness and that comfort and all of that, that's when you start to get lonely. Now, I don't want to sound like I'm some superhuman. I never feel lonely, and I mean I do. There are times throughout the year where, you know, I think, oh, I wish, I was with somebody right now, or but it's very specific. I think for me, and I will be honest, I would tell all of you this. It's probably mostly maybe during Christmas, which is one of my favorite times of year. Um, I don't know what it is about Christmas. I think it's just because I am a romantic, and would it be nice to, do Christmas things with like a partner or something like that? Of course. But I also don't let it get me down, and I think that's where that's what I was talking about earlier, is that don't let it become a dependence on somebody else for your happiness. But yeah, I mean, during Christmas, I'm like, I wish somebody was here, decorating the Christmas tree with me. But as soon as that thought enters my mind, that's how quickly it leaves, because I have so much fun doing it by myself as well. Like, I'll put on my music, Christmas music, I'll start decorating, I have my plan. And at the end of the day, what makes me excited is that I will have my family over, and they get to see all of this that I've done for them. So, there's it, there's no reason to feel lonely if you are alone. And I know it's easier said than done. I've also had a lot of practice doing things by myself, so it isn't very comfortable at the beginning. I think that people always want to say, oh, there's so much confidence in that person to do things alone, because I've been told that, like, wow, you must really like be confident because you aren't afraid to do things alone. And sure, maybe in some way that plays a role, because you kind of have to step out of a comfort zone in certain situations when there's a lot of people and groups of people. Like I told you, let's say you're going to Disneyland, right? There's always families and friend groups and couples. And let's say you wanted to go to Disneyland by yourself, which I want to go to Disneyland so badly. And if nobody wants to go with me, or, it doesn't happen, then I will go by myself. And guess what? People will also look at you, you know, that you're like riding alone and all that stuff. I mean, that would be kind of awesome to experience anyway. I would love to experience very extreme things by myself, just to kind of see what it's like, because in certain situations, I've only done them with other people. I feel like at this point, I've kind of already covered everything that I wanted to cover, but I just want to again reiterate that you don't need somebody to be happy, content, to have fun, to do things, to anything, like at all. And it's also okay if you do. It's also not a bad thing if you want someone next to you doing something. If you prefer to have shared experiences rather than experiences alone, that's great too. Like I said, there are certain things that I in the future may want to do with a partner or with my family, and that's okay. But don't let that dictate who you are as a person or your happiness or the things that you do, the things that you accomplish, the things that happen throughout your day, or even during the holidays. Imagine if I waited for like this whoever person to decorate a Christmas tree with me, and I never decorated the Christmas tree. Like that would be one really sad Christmas tree. But I have talked enough and my voice is, I feel it's starting to get raspier, so I will leave it here. Halloween is coming up, and I think I will be having a bonus episode talking about, um, paranormal things I have experienced. That would be a good episode. Also, kind of creepy, but I'm really excited to record that. So, hope you are doing well, and thank you again so much for listening. And thank you to those who have been sharing my podcast on either your Instagram stories or through text to your friends. I really appreciate it. It means a lot to me, and I can see that my podcast is gaining traction. So thank you again for sharing. And if you want to continue sharing it, I completely appreciate it. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram at Living Off Grit, and I will talk to you very soon.